Hi guys, welcome to Lizzie Dean Makes. I'm Lizzie Dean and today I thought I'd give you my top 10 frugal kitchen tips. So number one is to invest in good Tupperware. So there's different types of Tupperware on the market. There's a very big difference between cheap and nasty and cheap and functional. So these were both for £2 because these were 50p each and this was a pack of 4 for £2. These are incredibly flimsy plastic and they just break apart in one use, two uses. They won't last for very long at all. This one was actually 50p from Morrison's. They do this one, which I think is 0.5 litres. They do around 0.5 litres as well, and a tall and thin sort of 1 litre, and then they do a big 3 litre lunchbox size. They're so much more solid construction, especially when they're frozen and you have to really get the lids off when they've got frozen food inside. This is going to last a lot longer and they are more or less the same price, so I would go and invest in some decent Tupperware. If you go out and you're spending 50p on an item, for £10 you can come away with 20 pieces of Tupperware. That means you can have 20 meals frozen in your freezer. You're not going to be able to eat that in a go, even if you were eating frozen meals for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, it may be a week, even 2 weeks. You probably wouldn't get through all of the food that you could have frozen in these. So I think just go and buy it. It's a good investment of your money. The second thing I think is worth noting is the plastic freezer clips that you get to reseal frozen bags of produce. They sort of hinge open and they clip closed again, and they always break. They always break because they don't actually have a proper hinge. They're just using the plastic's elasticity to form a hinge. They freeze, they become brittle, they break. You can get maybe 4 for £1, maybe 6 for £1 if you're pushing it. I would say don't bother, go and get the wooden clothes clips like this. At minimum you're going to get 10 for £1. Normally you're talking 25, 50, even 100 in a pack of these, and they do the job just as well. And if they do break, you just feed the wood back through the metal clip and they carry on working again. So, you know, once you've figured out how to get them back on the spring, these things will keep going. Plus you can use them to peg your laundry out, so you can have one batch of a couple of hundred of these in a tub in the kitchen, and it's multi-purpose. Dried goods in the store cupboard, frozen goods in the freezer, and they peg your washing out. What could be better? My third top tip is to invest in a silicone baking sheet. So if you are grilling things under the grill, like grilled cheese, or if you're a meat eater, maybe bacon or sausages, things like that, grilled tomatoes, this is a great alternative for those. Also for baking things like chips or burgers or anything in the oven. Instead of using foil, the same with actual baking of cake and cookies and things like that, instead of using greaseproof paper, one of these is equally functional, and you can bung it in the dishwasher and reuse it again and again. And they're a couple of pounds and you don't have to buy foil or greaseproof paper. You're done with 1 or 2 of these in your kitchen cupboard. You won't need any more foil or greaseproof paper. The fourth thing is actually to freeze things. That's Charlie, my dog. To freeze things in ice cube trays. Shush! I used to buy chopped tomatoes, and I wouldn't use a whole tin because you're only putting a bit in a pasta sauce or something you're making from scratch. So the rest of the tin, you put it in the fridge, and it's got a limited shelf life on it. But if you pour it out into either small snack size Tupperwares or ice cube trays, you can get multiple little sort of shots of that for further use. Another great thing to do with that is things like stocks, or if you're making chili pastes. You know, if you get a batch of anything from your garden, allotment or some pot plants or anything like that, chili plants are a good one because you get the harvest all in one go. and you're not going to use it all in one go. But when you do use it, you're only going to want tiny amounts of it. So a good way to preserve it in small amounts that you can use a bit at a time is to actually freeze it in ice cube trays. So that would be my 4th top tip. Number 5 is the same as I was saying in my monthly grocery haul video earlier this week, is to invest in your spices, herbs and seasoning mixes. Essentially looking at world cuisines, there's sort of key staples, and one of the overriding trends, which I've been talking about with my mum, and if you follow me on Facebook, we've been having this conversation lately, is beans or meat or fish and rice. If you look at all sorts of different cultures and all sorts of different cooking styles that are using these same basic ingredients, but it's the spices and the seasoning that and the cooking style that makes them completely different. So what's the difference between a paella and a risotto and a pilaf? It's not the fundamental rice that you're cooking it with, it's the way that you're cooking it, and it's the spices and herbs and seasonings that you use to season and spice it with that give it its distinct flavour, that give it its distinct texture, that make it a completely different meal. So you can stock up on very, very basic store cupboard staples, and you can then, with a good spice cabinet, make a whole variety of different dishes that you can enjoy throughout the month without actually having to have new, expensive, flashy hero ingredients to make things different. So if you're eating meat and 2 veg, you have to change up the meat. It's the hero ingredient. The veg are, the sidekick, and you have to change up the hero ingredient, and that's expensive, and it's an expensive way of cooking. If you are changing up the method of cooking and the seasonings, it's maybe £1 for a jar of a seasoning mix, but that's going to get you maybe 20 servings worth of that seasoning, so it's 5p a go, and that is a much more cost-effective way of changing up what you're eating without actually having to spend a lot of money changing out the hero big ticket ingredients. My 6th tip is perhaps controversial. I'm going to say it anyway. Avoid buying fresh fruit and vegetables. You can get it tinned, you can get it frozen, you can get it dried. There are so many different ways of getting your 5 a day. You can grow it in your own garden cheaply. In the United States, I believe the statistic is half of all food that's bought and prepared in the United States is thrown away. I'm not sure what the statistic is in Britain, but I think it's pretty close. And I honestly believe that most of the food waste that we throw away in our house is things that are fresh that we have not been able to use in time. So that's something that we've made a big effort to counteract, and we've actually put in place a lot of changed habits to avoid having this food spoilage in the fridge of fresh fruit and vegetables that have just gone beyond their date and haven't been used in time. And it saves an awful lot of money, but it's also good for the environment, it's good for the planet. The less food that needs to be produced to feed you, the less water that's required, the less petrol is required to ship it from where it's being grown to where you're consuming it. The list is endless. It is much better to have preserved fruit and vegetables, whether that's frozen, dried or tinned, because you can keep it. It's not going to suddenly run away on you and have gone over the edge and spoiled. You can keep it and you get all of the nutritional benefit minus the cost implications of it going over the boil. The 7th top tip is to cook double and freeze half. This is not new, this is not rocket science, this is meal prepping at its most basic level. I mean, some people like me might do a meal prep session where they will prep multiple different dishes in one go, all for the freezer. That's the core outcome of that session, is to cook as much as possible and freeze it. But another alternative option, if you don't have time to spend hours in the kitchen on perhaps a Sunday afternoon, particularly if you've got young children at home, anything like that, another alternative is to cook as you would cook on an evening, you know, a 30-minute meal, but cook double and freeze the other half. If you've invested in good Tupperware, that'll be easy to do. The other alternative to Tupperware is good freezer bags. The bag and tie tops aren't so great for freezing liquid meals. From experience, it's not a good idea. Definitely go for the Ziplocs. You can get cheaper alternatives to the Ziplocs. I like these press and seal ones that have essentially got double-sided sticky tape in the middle, as opposed to an actual ridged zipper. They're quite a good alternative, I think. But freeze half of what you've prepared that evening. That way you don't have to go out of your way to meal prep, but it's happening anyway, and you've got a steady stock of frozen meals if you really can't be bothered to cook that night, which is us most weekday evenings. My 8th top tip is to cook more plant-based meals. You've got meat-free Mondays. There's various different ways of saying this, and it being a thing. Even if you're not vegan or you're not vegetarian, you've got no desire to be. If you look at a lot of religions, there are certain days of the week when you don't eat meat. I'm thinking sort of the Catholic Church and fish on Fridays, which is something that my mother-in-law's informed me about. I've never really come across that before because I don't eat fish. But having that alternate between having expensive meat-based meals and having plant-based meals. Even cheese-based meals are more expensive than plant-based meals. A pizza, a pasta bake, something like this that involves a lot of cheese. That cheese is actually a much more expensive ingredient than you realise, compared to the plant-based alternative recipes. I wouldn't say that plant-based cheeses are less expensive than regular cheese, because that's not true. But avoiding cheese entirely in those recipes, you can have a certain number of days of the week that have very frugal dishes without having to eat like that all the time. If that's what you want to do, it's a great way of meeting in the middle. My top tip number 9 would be, if you are going to eat meat, then find the cheaper cuts. In Britain, we like pork. Pork is pork and chicken are the two varieties of meat and poultry that are consumed the most. But we only eat certain parts of the animal. So we actually import a huge amount of bacon from Denmark, because we can't actually produce enough pigs to produce the amount of bacon we eat. Because the bacon is only one part of a pig. There's all that other meat that we produce, and a lot of the time we're actually exporting that, or it's being used in processed things like sausages, chicken nuggets, etc. The same with chicken, it's the chicken breasts. If you buy chicken wings or chicken thighs, it's a lot more cost effective. So if you really like chicken, perhaps switch up the chicken breast based recipes for other cuts of the chicken. If you like pork, there are many alternatives to bacon and pork's chops that are out there. Belly pork, gammon, these are just a few to name. But if you go and speak to your local butcher, they can tell you what the cheaper cuts are, and particularly other things as well, things that are not those key things. So you've got all the game birds, you've got venison and so on in terms of like game animals, but you've also got all the alternative cuts, and you've got all of the offal. I know it's not a very nice topic, but every pig or chicken or cow that's being slaughtered for meat, there's all the other parts of it as well. In times gone by, we would have cooked pig's trotters, we would have cooked tongue of the cow, I can't remember if it's called ox tongue, ox tongue, we would have made ox tongue soup, all sorts of different things out of the offal. Those recipes are still around, and those cuts of meat are still around to be found at a much cheaper price. So perhaps get a bit less squeamish and be a bit more adventurous, and you can find a lot cheaper cuts of meat if that's what you want to do. My 10th and final top tip on the Frugal Kitchen is to learn to preserve. Learn to make jams, jellies and chutneys. It's basically one process, and it involves learning about setting temperatures of sugar. You can just buy a sugar thermometer, but there are quite straightforward ways of checking the set that have been around for generations that don't involve any fancy equipment. You can just do this in your regular saucepan over the hob with no special ingredients, no special tools either. You can purchase things like pectin to help with the set, but you can also just follow the recipes that use fruit and vegetables that are high in pectin anyway, which is what our ancestors would have done. I mean, jams, jellies and chutneys have been around for a very long time, and they don't have to be as complicated as they can be made. Gear acquisition syndrome is a real thing. You don't need to invest in a special jam pot or a special jam thermometer or any of the gubbins. You can just do it the way your grandma would have done it, and I would very much advise learning to do that if you're growing your own. Things like, I found 14 chilli plants for 5p each at B&Q, so I bought them. When I get my harvest of all of my chilies, which will hopefully be quite imminent, how will I be preserving all of those chilies so that they don't go to waste? Because there is no way that we're going to eat that many chilies. They're not something that you pick up and snack on. Well, we wouldn't. I'm sure there are some people out there who don't mind a bit of capsicum poisoning. Not us. But learning to make chili jam is something that my husband and I both enjoy doing, and it's something that makes great Christmas gifts. We make food Christmas hampers every year. Sometimes we make them all ourselves, and sometimes, if time's short, we purchase odd and unusual ingredients for the store cupboard and make hampers of those. But chili jam is something that always features without fail in our Christmas gifts, and it's something that we make a lot of and we enjoy, because we eat mostly vegetarian. Chili jam and cheese is a staple. It just has to be done. Chili jam and cheese sandwiches and soup is a very good, happy, I can't be bothered to cook meal in our house. So learn to make jams, jellies and chutneys would be my final top tip. So those have been my Frugal Kitchen top tips on how to save money in the kitchen. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do, please like it below. Leave me any comments on your top tips for a cheap and frugal kitchen, and subscribe if you haven't already to see more videos like this. Thanks a lot. Bye.